Hello again. I've been thinking over the week about life in general and how we got to be where we are. In early human times, life was not very easy. The amenities that are available to us today did not exist. The hunters would hunt, and while the hunters hunted, the women would stay back, left with the old, with the infirmed, with the children, and responsible for everything that went on. The men, on the other hand, went out to find prey so that they could bring it home and everyone would eat. The women, on the other hand, were responsible for everything else. It seems to me that despite all of the amenities, very little has changed. Women are the multitaskers because everyone accepts that as so, and the men seem to basically accept their role. But here is the problem. The problem is that people come to Accu Weight Loss to lose weight. And day after day, week after week, I hear the stories of temptation, of pressure, of using food for comfort. And we've reviewed many times the issue of self-love, loving self, and all of the things that go with it. And so I thought it might be interesting to spend a few moments talking about what is self-love. Well, the first thing that I'd like to talk about is the word selfish. Self-ish. For many people, it's not a good word because it means putting oneself first when used that way to the disadvantage of others. What I think about, however, is how can you use the word selfish if you don't truly have a self? Now, the next concept is self-love. And what does that mean, Dr. Schwartz? Well, self-love combined with the word selfish is, first of all, sort of like being on the airplane, God forbid, when something goes wrong and the oxygen mask falls out. The first instruction is put your own mask on first so that you don't pass out and are unable to help others. Maybe that's selfish, or maybe it's just smart. The next part of selfish, of self-love, in a positive way, is making oneself important enough so that by feeling good about being who you are, by being in charge of who you are, by liking how you behave and therefore liking yourself because of your behavior, the ability to deal is enhanced. And then there's the last point I'd like to make today in that regard. It has to do with the word neediness or needy. One of the things that I've learned over the years, that it's a learned behavior. Neediness is one of those kinds of things, and we all feel badly when we see that neediness. But the truth is that true neediness can never be satisfied, because the more you support neediness, the greater the neediness becomes, and the greater the neediness becomes, the greater the need. Reality has very little to do with it. Several years ago, I tried an experiment. It's in fact many years ago, when I was working as a social worker. There were two women sitting there and arguing. They were arguing about money. One of them had no money, the other had $20. I asked the woman who had the $20 to give one of those $20 to the other woman who had nothing. After a while, she agreed, and the story moved on. The following week, the two women were together again, and the woman without money was again pressing on the woman who had the $20. When she saw me coming, she raised her hand and said, "Please don't." And I said, "Give her one of your $20. This went on for 4 weeks. When the woman without money left after the 4th week, I asked the first woman how the fact that she had given the other woman the $1 each week had affected her life. And after discussion, we learned that there may have been an impact, but the impact was truly not noticeable. And so what I pointed out to the woman with the $20 is that neediness has some reality to it, but there is a great deal of emotionality connected to it. Her neediness, in her mind, was not meaningful enough for her to have fallen apart and not be able to deal after giving away one of her $20. What does that mean? All of us have responsibilities. Women, most of all, have multiple responsibilities, and they oftentimes feel extremely confused and guilty and upset and stressed and pressured when they have to, in their minds, choose between all of the tasks they have and themselves. Well, here's what I've learned. There are two things in life: emergencies and everything else. If it's an emergency, you've got to deal with it immediately. If it's not an emergency, it has to be dealt with, but not immediately. I want you to think through how going off the program, because of the fact that you have to put aside some of the chores, some of the responsibilities, some of the activities, some of the behaviors that you're responsible for a very short time, to take care of yourself, to make yourself first. It's not an emergency 95+% of the time. So 95% of the time, I want you to stop, think of yourself first, take care of yourself first, and then you have all the time in the world, because you have the ability now to give, because you've given to yourself first, and then you can take care of all the responsibilities, and weight loss will no longer be so pressing. Thank you for listening. Talk to you again soon.